How long should a podcast intro be exactly? And when should a podcast intro start? Definitely shouldn't be at the beginning. Anything at the very beginning, it just gets skipped, right? You just want that Netflix skip intro button. You just don't want it to be there. Obviously, the podcast app, you just skip in seconds, just blowing right past the thing, especially if you know how long the intro is. I myself change the intro every single time. Have been doing it about a minute in, which seems like a good amount of time basically for me to get from the computer to my seat, at least when having a guest. But I do like the idea of changing it up so you actually don't know when you can fast forward. You don't know when the podcast intro is over. And it's also nice when it does start later on because you can hook the person with some truly interesting and, of course, not at all meta or too self-referential discussion to ensure that someone's podcast interest will remain completely piqued.
COVID. More like morbid. more like morbid. Hey, I killed a fucking
Speaking of morbid, happy Easter, everybody. Not sure if you celebrated, even if you had just ham or Starburst jelly beans sometime in the last week. I'm sure that's pretty much good enough. It's a wonderful time of year. It's spring. I find myself loving spring. The more I get advanced in age, the closer to 40 I get. I'm 32. Each year in my 30s, I feel like 31, you get spring. 32, you really get spring. Maybe this is coronavirus. I'm not sure. You know, things sometimes find themselves in historical context. But I really love spring. I love the balance in it. You still have cold nights. You still have warm days. You still have hope, right? There's still so much of the year left. Again, talking about the fact that I'm 32 years old, feeling like I'm in the springtime of my life. Maybe that's why I'm living spring. Anyway, I just, seeing the green grass come back around St. Patrick's Day as an Irishman, obviously, gotta love that too, Matt is going to be returning to the podcast in 2 days' time. Can't tell you how excited I am about this fact. I actually am trying to squeeze this podcast in for a number of reasons, but in part, of course, just to strictly provide marketing for Matt's appearance in 2 days. So please be sure to watch the 43rd episode of the podcast when Matt will be regaling us with every single thing I'm sure he's entertained and occupied himself with in the last 4 months. Those second half of Corona tips that maybe you didn't figure out and get to in the first half of Corona that I'm sure at this point he must have mastered. Super excited, not just for Matt to return, but just to return to other things in normal life. Of course, socializing, seeing other humans again, recording maybe with 3 people, maybe with 4 people, maybe hearing more than one perspective on video in this garage/studio. Speaking of, I actually got some of the carpet down. So we have kind of a sound test here. We maybe have different acoustic principles versus the last episode. So anyone with good headphones that's truly paying attention to the waveforms here, let me know. Let me know what you think. I could use a second, third set of ears. But basketball is going to be returning soon, not just the full studio here with people in it, but basketball is going to be great. I actually heard someone playing recently, recently meaning 40 seconds ago. Someone's playing at like 11 o'clock at night on Easter, which is when I'm recording this, but it was great. I actually went yesterday for the first time, and I masked up, and I was there. There weren't like a lot of people there yet. I wasn't like playing games. I was just there with a bubble person, Shavana. Shout out. We were enjoying basketball, of course, and I really miss it. Obviously, it's going to be different when you actually play and shoot when you're around other people again. There's a big difference between just like, playing horse or whatnot, pig, and actually playing 5-on-5. I found myself really sucking through air twice during masks during Corona. A lot of times doing like construction-based stuff, it wasn't pleasant, but really like truly gasping for air once playing the drums, recorded a jam journal, and I was really struggling after the first song. Even with the electronic drums, hit like we were playing in like June, so it was pretty warm outside. And just yesterday, actually trying to play some basketball really intensely with this mask on. It was a new mask, felt comfortable around the ears, might have been a little heavier on the mouth. You know what I'm talking about. So maybe that was part of the equation, but in general, I really loved getting out there. Can't wait to play basketball again. Shout out to the Park basketball gang if you guys are, there ready to play. I hope you are. I like to play at an outdoor park with people. I'm realizing I shouldn't say his name. Like this is like too public. I'm saying the name of the park. I'll cancel it out. You guys know who you are. You know who you are. Other sports teams though, and like sports leagues that I'm in on Facebook and like are in the groups for, I've noticed that they're really starting to chime in now. It's the very beginning of April. People are getting vaccinated and seemingly more confident in future sports activities. So it seems like people have been really into that, obviously trying to find the sports game opportunities for the future. I want to talk about a few things today, not just spring and pleasantries and Matt's glorious return. I'm going to talk about the fact that drums are actually multiple instruments. You always hear like bass drums, guitar, it's like a single thing. I myself am a drummer. I always consider myself to be like a single instrument player, but I just realized they're not. They're like all different instruments. Some are like metal sheet discs. Some are mylar. They're plastic covered shells of wood, basically, sometimes often covered in lacquer. And then you have like these foot pedals that you're stomping down on. You can hear it. You can even get some acoustics here. And sometimes you're using a wood stick. Maybe sometimes you're using a metal stick if you're Lars Ulrich. But there's 1,000 different ways to play the drums. There's 1,000 different instruments. They're multiple instruments. Second thing I'm going to talk about, of course, how do you top this? Second thing I'm planning on talking about is Steely Dan, which is comical. Well, if I didn't know anything about Steely Dan, or if you were asking me about this a year ago, it would feel comical. I don't know why that is. I'll get into that, though. I will talk about why it's comical, Steely Dan, but also just what's up with Steely Dan, what I think about Steely Dan. Steely Dan's great, I learned. I'd never listened to Steely Dan, ever. I mentioned the comical thing. People, they made fun of it for some reason. I don't know, Gen Xers or various people. I don't get this. I saw some articles online. I haven't read it and gone through the think pieces of it all yet. But Steely Dan is amazing music, and yeah, it's always seemed like some sort of punchline to me. Back to the drums being multiple instruments. I've been playing for 20 years, and this never truly dawned on me in this way. There were moments where I started to think that it was more that you had to master one type of skill and one type of execution, at least when you're thinking about your physical interfacing with the instrument. This is, using your hands to play the plastic sheet of the drum head, right? And your foot to play the metal rod that's holding the felt ball that's banging against, again, maybe a vertical plastic sheet, mylar skin drum head. These are different feelings. You have different muscles that help you strike in different ways. Your calf is not nearly the same as your wrist. And there are some instruments you're playing just with your mouth, and the articulations are possibly, different versions of a similar mouth movement or articulation, similar with maybe your two hands playing guitar. Your feet too, if you're using stomp boxes, if you're into pedals, if you're cueing effects or playing notes, I don't know, sub octaves, bringing in other things. But with the drums, you're talking different limbs, different joints. And then, of course, yeah, different materials. Again, the cymbals. One cymbal, it's up on a stand, and you smash it really hard, and it just like shakes everywhere. It's the crash. It goes crazy. Another cymbal, a ride, you're hitting it more like in smaller hits, in like smaller little pings, and not trying to just like smash the whole thing like the crash. It's the ride cymbal. You're just trying to get little pings and help the feeling and the sizzle of the song ride on. Of course, now I have to take you to the hi-hats. And yes, I'm staring at a drum kit, by the way. It's hard for me not to look at my drum kit. I finally just set my drum kit up. And yeah, easiest to talk about the thing that's directly in front of you. But you have hi-hats now where like you're not just dealing with the one cymbal. You're dealing with a second cymbal in that same area, orientation. No, it's not the same orientation. A completely flipped orientation. They're sandwiched. They're smacking together. You're using your foot, using your hand, using your foot and your hand in concert. It feels one way when they're taut and your foot's down, and it feels a total another way when your foot's up and it's loose. Might seem kind of funny. It might be like I'm trying to point out all these differences within interfacing with a drum set or multiple drum sounds, rides, crashes that we traditionally like associate into one instrument. Obviously, all instruments have their sort of nuance and their difference. They might have different sizes, or they might just be altered, maybe even outside of the original discipline or the original interest of the instrument, the original spirit of the instrument. Kind of like if you take an electric guitar, Stratocaster body, and put like a bass guitar type pickup in there, to now simultaneously turn that into sort of a bass and a guitar to make that a different experience for you. Drums are interesting because they force you into that different experience. Of course, through being different instruments, if I haven't convinced you that already. But then, you seeing, interfacing, hearing these in different ways. If you start to record drums too, if you get into the production element of drums, you notice this really instantly as well. If you're programming beats, maybe in a computer, a lot of times people will put the bass drum first. You're not actually programming all the sounds like you would with all your limbs, like you would like a normal quote unquote drummer would, old school. I don't know how to even phrase this anymore. But programming beats, it's not uncommon to maybe bass, then do snare, then maybe put in like little hi-hat clicks, taps, maybe go back in, put something in the snare as a response to the hi-hats, so you can compose in a completely different way. And you're definitely treating in that situation like the drums like they are treated like they're completely different instruments. Also miking them. Like if you want to buy an audio interface and plug microphones into your computer, you learn quickly that channel 1 is guitar, channel 2 maybe is bass. If you're playing this type of rock-based music, I would. Channel 3 is bass, drum. Channel 4 is snare drum. Channel 5 is tom 1. Channel 6 is tom. You need a bunch of channels for the drums. You'd have to do, I'd say, at least 3 mics on a drum kit to get some sort of real definition. Modern drum kits, though, they could have 10. It's unbelievable. They could have 20. They could be mic in the top. They could be mic in the bottom. Speaking of, for those of you who are not acquainted in drums and still interested in drums at this point, they have different types of plastic heads in the top and the bottom. They're supposed to have different thicknesses. Maybe they're supposed to be tuned differently. So in addition to learning how to take care of tuning a drum head, turning those keys, making the drum head have a certain pitch, you're doing the other head on the same drum, on the bottom of that drum. You're doing it at a different level, and you're treating it differently, and it's just amazing, the detail. Speaking of detail, Steely Dan. Steely Dan is a band I mentioned. It seemed like a punchline type thing. I brought this up to Rob, friend of the podcast. I was lucky enough to see him outdoors at some point recently. And he was talking about how they made fun of Steely Dan in like 40-Year-Old Virgin. It came up there. I know I've heard it as like punchlines for other things. Honestly, recently, I thought Steely Dan was the Bulls theme song for anyone. A lot of Chicago's listening to this. This is the Alan Parsons Project. I don't know why that was Steely Dan. I just somehow associated. I'm like, I don't know. It's a keyboard, right? This is a keyboard player. It's Steely Dan, right? It's a piano player in Steely Dan. But I always thought like the Bulls theme was Steely Dan, and it just got roped into an era of music I guess wasn't listening to naturally. But it turns out I was listening to this era. Obviously Led Zeppelin, other bands that are maybe more popular and accepted in the current mainstream. But Steely Dan is great. Without just giving general descriptives, let me get specifically into it. It's a band comprised of a number of different members. I'm not going to give you the whole history lesson, but it's basically 2 main people, Donald Fagen and Walter Becker, and then they hired session musicians to play a bunch of parts, but they would often write the scores. And they would have vibraphones in songs, they would have saxophones in songs, they would have solo sections in songs, they would have extremely high quality audio recordings, like they were pretty cutting edge in terms of the sound of the instruments, which is, I think, something that's always admirable, to try to be on the leading edge of what a technological medium can even deliver, right? Interesting to be able to hear different drummers, I suppose, with different songwriters. It was great. I mentioned the solo section thing. They have clean guitars in there. Most rock music, you're hearing a lot of reverberated guitars, maybe there's like delays in the guitars. And I actually love funk music. There's a lot of funky, clean type of strumming in these songs that I personally find like really fun and exciting. Steely Dan also just ended up being a fantastic thing to get into at the very end of a 1-year pandemic, virus-based pandemic, in which case you could use like happy, like kind of like put some energy in you type music. There's like, I don't know, 6 albums they made from 72 to 80 that are just incredible. Bodhisattva, I'm not pronouncing this right, is like the first track off their second album. It's an amazing like rock song, has like, the solo sections, like energy. And the second song, you listen to that song and then listen to the second song on the album, and then boom, the vibraphones come in, or like these different melodic elements you would never expect having just listened to like the blues-based rock song that just preceded it. So lots of surprises. Listening to other Steely Dan songs, Peg, the only thing I could think of was De La Soul, because I listened to I Know, the song by De La Soul, over and over, and they sample it. And there ended up being a bunch of these like samples you find in a lot of times hip hop music that were Steely Dan. Another one, Kanye's Champion. He had Kid Charlemagne sampled. And I think Kanye was one of the first times I had heard of Steely Dan and wanted to listen to Steely Dan. Maybe I don't know if I was watching a compilation of how he had sampled certain songs, or if I heard him in some clip talking about Steely Dan, but that did somehow cross my mind in some way in the past. Like, wait, I like Kanye's music, his sample-based music, but I think I don't like Steely Dan, right? So this is incongruent. Like, this doesn't make sense to me. Which, just let me cut to the chase with this lesson. If even if you think it's like not for you, or it's like lame or something, which I felt like that about Steely Dan for some reason for 30 years that I've been alive, it doesn't mean that it is. It could just be that someone's having a specific reaction to that band. It might be that someone's into the feeling of a band, or the fact that they want a band to all be together. Maybe someone would be sold out. They feel like a band would be selling out a drummer by like hiring a different drummer for a different piece. It's hard to say. The music rocks. I mean, it's fantastic. It jazzes too. It's super jazzy. I didn't mention that. The saxophone, if you couldn't figure it out with that's something. Deacon Blues, got to listen to that if you want to hear a saxophone solo. Also, just a hilarious, comedic, punchline-like chorus. I fucking love like musical comedy. It's ridiculous. Because I can be such like a media hater in some ways, and so like uptight, but there's something about musical comedy that especially if I've heard it a few times, it's just totally disarming to me. I think it's just kind of like, it just like forces the connections in your brain. Like, you have to be okay. Like, you're playing certain chord changes and you're landing certain punchlines, and it just like has to work on some level. Again, but this is probably me having grown up listening to enough of it and being interested maybe in both music and comedy. So that's something there. A couple other people that brought up Steely Dan that kind of like made me wonder or think. Someone related to Kanye, Mike Dean, his producer. I heard him talking about once that he was like going back listening to a lot of Steely Dan. He like kind of makes a fourth of modern music, or has in the last like 10, 20 years. And not even modern music. He was like Selena's band director in the 90s. Anyway, this guy's a legend. He brought up Steely Dan. Same for Mac DeMarco. I heard him talking about recording techniques. I've found myself going down this rabbit hole of all these different recording techniques and studio practices that has kind of flared up some of this like Steely Dan talk. So I hope I've given you some reasons to listen to Steely Dan if you didn't already. I think being one of the most popular, famous bands in the world, I'm sure maybe you already had your own opinion of the band. It's just somehow they like were one of those bands. I listen to music. I've tried to go back, like sometime in my 20s, like, oh, David Bowie. I never listened to David Bowie before. I thought this is just whatever, and same for the Beatles, or like all these bands that you kind of like overlook and take for granted in a way. It's got me wondering, especially with, again, that clean guitar, that clean Stratocaster sound, and like the state of modern music. Thinking about the electric guitar still being electronic music. The electric guitar it's an extremely expressive electronic instrument. So curious where clean electric guitar is gonna lay in the future of music. I don't know how long I've gone. I kind of wanted to wrap it up here before the day was over. Let me give you just, a few more updates here. What's going on? I'm working on an attachment rock video. So this is like a new series type thing I'm doing. I still can't see Austin, who's like my cousin who plays guitar predominantly, and Rob, like bass player, that we did like Jam Journal together. I still have not been seeing them a lot. So we've been trying to like compose things via email attachment basically. And I'm actually putting together a video for the third song we made. So we did finish the music. Actually, I opened the last podcast with the song that will be coming out in the third Attachment Rock video. It is not labeled, but it'll be coming out sometime in April. So search by date, because I didn't title the thing yet. Quickly about vaccines. This is kind of exciting. I think the last time I was on the I podcasted, it was like 3 weeks ago. Only one in 6 people, counting myself, in my bubble had been vaccinated at all. Had received any vaccine. And now 5 out of 6 in my bubble have received at least 1 dose. I'm the last person in my bubble actually to be receiving a vaccine. I feel lucky to say I do have an appointment this week. I just got one. So that now will allow me to not be peer pressured by other people in my bubble, of course, to get the vaccine. No, but I actually am shocked by how quickly this vaccine, it went from people saying, why don't you wait actually to get the vaccine? You know, don't sign up. That's not cool. To why did you wait? Why did you wait to sign up to try to get the vaccine? No, but seriously, like people just seem to like rush the gate. So much so that like I've been listening to certain podcasts. Like 2 weeks ago, they were like, "Oh, getting the vaccine, whatever." 1 week ago, they're like, they're talking about hanging out, and then the next week they're like actively, clearly making it clear everyone has gone back to normal life. This is like a rich person's podcast, the All In podcast. Actually, I was watching, which are, you know, they're like Silicon Valley venture capitalists, Chamath Palihapitiya and David Sachs, David Freeberg, and Jason Calacanis. All In. It is an interesting podcast in that they hold like tremendous positions of power and knowledge within Silicon Valley. So that I would recommend it for that reason. And of course, it's interesting to see how like truly rich and well-connected and wealthy people live and think. It's actually, they end up really revealing themselves in some of the elements of high society in a way through their relationships and through just the way that they speak. Without getting too much into class, you know, this is late night on Easter. I should wrap this up. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm very excited for Matt to come back. Matt, if you're watching, Lord knows I'm trying to practice, man. I'm trying to get this equipment back out. Trying to stay on my chops for you. Try to get the YouTube traffic up for you a little bit, and then yeah, to everyone else, you know, that's been on the pod, we got to schedule some stuff. The outdoors now, it's nice enough. We went from freezing to nice in about a week. And again, I mentioned the vaccine, so puts me about a month and a half out from being back to normal. I hope you're all able to savor the last bit of time you have in this. Look at me, I'm getting all nervous here hitting the mic. In what will be, and in probably, you know, a pretty unique time within your experience being alive. So try to make the most of it and try to write some things down. I wanted to record this in part because I'm getting my vaccine now. This is my last like Corona mindset. Which I think was pretty clear based on the composition of the theme music that I made before recording this. But truly, I want you to find, you know, the good things in what you've done and what you're going to do. And if not, I don't know. You'll fucking figure it out. It's up to you. It's up to you. See you soon. Bye, everyone.